Hey, Illinois fans, Doug Bouchon with the Orange and Blue News Podcast. We're joined by longtime columnist John Supini, and we're here to preview Illinois basketball the 2024-25 season. Who better to do that with than Illini grade and all-time leading scorer at the school, Deon Thomas, and color commentary guy now for Learfield Sports for quite a few years. Deon, thanks for coming on. Are you ready for the college basketball season?
Well, first of all, it's truly a pleasure. Always sitting down with you and John, man, is a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm very excited about this season. And, Brian and I, at the end of last season, we always sit down like, man, it's going to be so long before this, we're back together again. And you blink your eyes and basketball season's right back. So very excited about, what this new team is going to look like. I think Coach and his staff have done a wonderful job of putting together what is a very talented team.
That was kind of my first question. I'm sure you got a chance to watch them. They made the trip down to Oxford for the exhibition game against Ole Miss, a charity basketball game. Some good things and some things for Brad Underwood to work on. But, what jumped out at you? There's 10 new guys on this roster. What jumped out at you from the first showing from these guys in the exhibition game?
Well, one of the first things you look at is the fact that, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of new faces. And, so I took my time before I actually had an opportunity to watch those guys play. I watched them get together at the tailgate, the basketball tailgate. I watched how they hung out with one another. How did they react to one another? I mean, because you have people from so many different parts of not just the country, but the world. Guys have come in that have been stars or either really good players on their previous teams, not to mention Kasparas, who, and you look at him and Will Riley, who, you're seeing their names, splattered throughout the NBA draft boards. How are they going to react to one another? How are they going to, if they're going to click? So that was the first thing that I was looking at, and watching those guys get together at the tailgates, and watching them interact, hang out, laugh, joke, poke fun at one another was the first sign that I think this team has an opportunity to be special. And then I had an opportunity to watch them actually come together and play at Brad School, first and foremost. And to get to see that first practice and those first few practices when they were on the floor all together, you really see how talented this team is and how deep this team could possibly be. But now comes the growing pains. It comes to growing pains of learning how to play with your teammates, watching them come together and learn Brad's scheme and his offense and defense and how he operates and how he wants things done. And this is where I think this team is now. I mean, if you go back and you look at, the exhibition against Butler, did a really good job moving the ball, could score the ball, shot the ball well, and then you get the opposite when you come to the game in Oxford. 22 turnovers, really poor shooting first half. You take this team on the road to play against, an older team, which that, Ole Miss team is. When you compare it, to what we were last year, we're babies. And you really have to take a look at who you are, where you are. And as you know, Coach played everyone and played various combinations. So I don't think you're really looking to judge anything from this. These are more teaching moments and teaching opportunities, because this doesn't count right now. But it's a great opportunity to put together some really good film. And when you have these guys and you're telling them X, Y, and Z, now they got to see how, you not watching your passes or you not following through on certain things can really affect you before you get into the season. So very impressed by, these young men and their maturity, but they still have a long way to go to grow.
Well, college basketball is such a different sport now. It used to be the team you put on the floor. You spent years cultivating that and kind of building your team. Now it's almost like you're reconstructing your roster on an annual basis in the spring because of transfer rules, no sit out rule, NIL, and all that goes into that. How hard is it to take a team of 12 guys like Brad Underwood has this year and mold them into a team, even though, like you said, they're talented, they have individual talent. How hard is it to mold that into a cohesive team, and how much time do you think it takes? Is it mid-season before they're gelling? Is it a few games into the season?
Well, let's start off with, is this something that's difficult? Yes, it's very difficult. I mean, first of all, you don't know who is going to be on your roster from 1 minute to the next after the season ends. I mean, we were possibly projected to have 4 guys come back. We end up with 2 guys that come back. You know, we have an assistant coach step away. So you can't account for those things. But I will say this, and this is where I believe Brad Underwood's junior college experience helps us and helps prepare us, because at the junior college level, you know, and I was there for 5 years, your team is going to be considerably different every year. So with that in mind, I think this has given Brad maybe a little bit of a leg up on others that have not gone that route, to know and begin to be able to plan ahead to what you could possibly have to do or have to replace. And then you have to go out and find the guys that fit, not just great players. I mean, yes, we need great players, but you need the great players with the right attitudes, and guys that are going to play for the name on the front of the jersey and not their last name that's on the back of the jersey. And so I think that's the hardest thing, because yes, you want quality players, but you want quality people. And I mean, Doug, you guys have heard Brad say it all the time. He recruits character and not characters. And so you have to really make sure that you're finding the right guy, which sometimes means turning over 10 rocks instead of one. And then, as you mentioned, with this now in the age of NIL and transfer portal, you could think you have a kid, and 1 week later he's going somewhere else. So yes, it's very difficult. I've had people say, Deon, do you miss coaching? No, do not want to be coaching at this period of time. But I love the way Brad and his staff and the way he has it structured, because I think that's what helps this team be able to put together teams like this.
Are you surprised at all for a coach who's, I think he's 60 years old, has been in the business a long time? Are you surprised that he's proven to be so adaptable? And it seems to me like some of the younger coaches on the staff have been a really good influence on him, like his son Tyler and guys like that. And he just seems like he's so willing to adapt to the changes in the game.
Well, I mean, we saw that in year 1 and year 2. I mean, when Brad came over from Oklahoma State, I mean, we remember that defense. Now, I'm glad we've forgotten and we're not playing that defense anymore. You know, coaches are too good in the Big Ten to play defense in that manner. But I think that's what makes great coaches. You know, when you're a coach, you have to be able to mold your offense, mold your defense to the players that you have. And I think Brad has done a really good job of doing that, of being amenable to multiple things, whether it's, you know, the offense. I mean, as we talked about the defense and switching it when he realized things didn't work. And then when Zach came on board, moving a little bit more towards utilizing analytics to improve the way you did things defensively. And then what did he do? When you get a Kofi Coburn in here, he went from doing a 5-out, guys just moving around, to playing a strong post type position, you know, offense around Kofi. Kofi leaves, and then he's right back to being able to mold the clay and put guys in positions where they can be successful on the outside. But, you know, great coaches are great because they're able to put their players in positions to be successful. And that is what I believe Brad does better than anybody else. Puts his guys in position, realizes what they do, and when he gets a kid there that'll you know, give his heart to him the way he has so far since he's been here, then that normally translates to success.
Deon, when I watched that game on Sunday, it kind of was a little bit of not a slap in the face, but it was just a shock to see how young that team looked comparatively to what they were last year. I mean, last year they were grown men. You know, you look at a guy like Marcus Damas bringing the ball up. I mean, the guy was what, 230, 220?
Easy,
You know,
easy.
He was a linebacker. And now we look at these kids out there, they're kids, I wouldn't say they're slender, and what's the challenge? Is the challenge just as much physical as it is mental now? Or how does Brad go about working this through with a whole different team, when you're talking age and when you're talking, where their bodies are right now?
Right. Well, as far as the bodies, there's not a whole lot he can do with that. That's Adam Fletcher's job. And if you look at the transformations of many of the guys on this team, whether you take Ben Cumberhouse, you take Kylan Boswell, and you look at the differences in their bodies, they're going to get there. But there's things that if you look at a Kerry Booth, or if you look at a Will Riley, they're more shaped like Kevin Durant. You're never going to put big, huge muscles on those guys. And this is where your scheme and what you run offensively and defensively is going to be important, because it has to fit the type of players that you have. When you look back at last year's team, as you mentioned, we were one of the oldest teams in the country. And now we'll be one of the youngest, or somewhere there in the middle, with a lot of freshmen and young transfers. Kerry Booth is only a sophomore, and Jake is only a sophomore, going to his junior year, but we're a lot younger. So this is where it takes time to develop, and not necessarily physically, but more so from the mental aspect, because these guys are going to have to learn what it is to be college basketball players, and what it takes, and how you have to prepare every single minute, and that you can't take time off. Kylan was talking about the difference between being here and being at Arizona. And it was the attention to detail that Brad and his staff does. And if you take a look at it, and you look at his body, and you look at what he will be doing, I believe he's going to have a fabulous season. But it takes those little things. It takes the learning every day. And this is what Brad does best. He's a teacher. As he says, this is a developmental program. So it may not look as good right now, but this is where we all know Brad Underwood, when you get into the Big Ten season, we started looking like world beaters. And then we seem to get better and better as time goes on. It's him learning those guys. It's them learning him. And again, it's developing as they continue to go on and learn one another.
I see Kasparis. That's the first time I saw an extended time, and that was just from watching TV. But I've seen videos of him in the summer and his play overseas. You were over there. How different is the game played over there compared to how it's played in the Big Ten, and what's his biggest adjustment?
That's a great question. The difference is, I would say, especially for him, I mean, he was a 15-year-old playing against adults. So what his adjustments will be when it comes to, Big Ten basketball, collegiate basketball, is really the speed of the game. You don't have as many athletes flying around as we do here on a night-to-night basis. So that'll be part of his development. But what you do have is the basketball IQ, savvy, skill level that you have in Europe. You don't necessarily have that here on a night-to-night basis. So those are the two differences. So what he will have to do, and probably his biggest adjustment, will be to the speed and being able to keep guys in front of him from a defensive standpoint. Now, from an offensive standpoint, I don't believe he'll have much of a problem at all. His game is extremely mature. He shoots the ball extremely well. One of the things that I was most impressed by him is that he does not get sped up. You see freshmen, and I'm going to use Andre Curbelo as an example, because I think he's Andre Curbelo, with the exception of being smarter and understanding how to play under control. I do not believe he'll turn the ball over, but his basketball IQ and acumen is on that level, if not higher. And part of Carbelo's problem was because he was just he was so far ahead in his thinking than the guys around him that it made him look bad. And that's the difference between KJ and him, because KJ understands how to slow that down, how to play with tempo and play under control where his teammates can catch up with him, and that they can be on the same level while mentally being, a few steps ahead.
A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I spoke with Mark Coombs, and he told me he was overseas one time, and he was just in awe of how much the players overseas work on fundamentals and how much the coaching just drives in fundamentals. And he says it's totally different there than here. You would expect that to pay off pretty quick over here?
Oh, definitely, definitely for him, and as well as for Thomas Slav. I mean, there's one thing that you cannot replace the fundamentals of the games. Whether it's, I mean, people talk about the athleticism of a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant or a LeBron James, but they never talk about how fundamentally sound they are with their footwork and with their, all of those things that come along with it. Those are the things that get missed, over here in the U.S. I mean, because we work on taking, and you just touched it. You may understand how this triggers me because I'm having an old school kind of guy where we worked on fundamentals all the time. The AAU and amateur basketball right now in the United States is so oriented around games that I think the kids lose a lot of the drills and the fundamentals that you build on day in and day out, that if they're not an above average athlete, or if they're not special like a Will Riley, well, he's from Canada, but he played a lot here. But if you're not that level of player, then you tend to suffer, and it creates a gap between the really good guys and then the next guys, and that's where I believe how they develop players in Europe is so much better. Because if you have the basics, then you can do the other stuff.
Yeah,
but if you don't have the other stuff,
Mhm.
then if the basics are failing, then it hurts you in the other department. So they build it like they're building the house, man. I mean, their base is set, and after that, then you can build wherever you want on top of that base.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think you're right about KJ. I went down to Oxford and watched the game, and he's not going to turn it over like he did against Ole Miss.
No.
It's just a mental adjustment, I think, is learning that he can't make the spectacular play on every play. Sometimes it's just about making the wing entry pass and getting the offense going, and something he'll learn. But what really stands out to me about him is he plays with his head up, and he can go left or right at equal speeds. And if you're playing on the wing in that offense and he's got the ball, you better have your head up too, or the ball's gonna hit you in the face, because he's just has great vision, phenomenal
Yes.
passer. Really, that's probably his best skill is the passing ability. It's really, really good. The other guy from Europe that you mentioned, and Coach Underwood calls him Tommy, so I'll call him Tommy. But I turned to the other guy sitting at me at the game. I'm like, if this, and tell me if it's hyperbole, but if this guy stays 2 years, he's a first round draft pick.
Oh, no doubt.
The recruiting analyst in me started coming out during the game. I'm like, he's 7'1". Does he shoot the three? Yes, he shoots the three. That's a check. I didn't think that he would be strong enough to hold his position in the post like he did against Ole Miss, and that's against some mature players. But he was a post presence. He has got great footwork. He protects the rim, and being left-handed really helps him a lot when it comes to blocking shots, as it does with everybody in the history of the game if you're left-handed. But is that a good take? That this guy is a special player? I think he's going to be really, really good at Illinois.
Oh, no, I think you're spot on. I mean, he is the quintessential big guy for today's basketball. He's not he's not a great banger or any of that stuff around the basket, but he understands how to use jump hooks, turnaround jump, all of those nuances that we talked about that you get from the learning the basics. He, same as KJ, learned the basics from the ground up. So his post game is going to be solid. He's been playing against adults since he was 15 years old. So he's not afraid to get in there and be able to bang around. But one of the things he does understand is how to play from the floor up, and so he's going, you say you're not strong enough. Your post position doesn't come from your upper body, it comes from your lower body. And one of the things that he does well is use his lower body to post up. He can pass the ball extremely well out of the post. He can shoot the ball from three. So I agree with you 100%. If this kid stays 2 years and continues to work on his body, he's definitely an NBA player. And you know, I see the sky's the limit for him. I mean, he just has all of the things that when you look at the Joker, for example, he can do those very same things. Now, Brad ain't gonna have him dribbling the ball and bringing it up, but he can definitely pass it, spread it around, and spray it out of the post as well as score.
Well, one thing he can do, similar to Jokic, not saying he's Jokic, he's maybe the best player in the world, but one thing he can do is facilitate the offense out of
Yeah.
the high post. You get him the ball at the elbow, and he sees the floor, and much better passer than I thought he was. I think he had 2 or 3 assists against Ole Miss. I have to go back and look at the box score, but he had at least a couple of assists. So delving more into the lineup, you know, Kylan Boswell came from Arizona. I think the expectations with the fan base might have been just a little high with Kylan because of the player he was coming out of high school, but he has made an effort, a really strong effort to get in really good playing shape. I haven't seen the kid looking this good physically, you know, since high school. And what have you seen from him so far? What's his role on the team, and what can we expect from Kylan?
Well, I expect pretty big things from Kylan. I think we have a backcourt that a lot of people will begin to appreciate as they continue to grow together. As I talked about his focus when he hit campus, I mean, as he talked about when I spoke to him on campus, was about paying attention to the details, the difference between being in Arizona and being here. He's expressed how he's working on becoming a more vocal leader and utilizing both aspects of his game, which is defending on one end and being an offensive player on the other end. Brad does not mind guys scoring. This kid will put the ball in the basket. As long as he can concentrate and continue to grow on the defensive end, I think that, you know, he's going to be he could be one of the best two-way players, better two-way players in the Big Ten. I think with his experience, being back home, he has a comfort level here. He's known Brad and you know other guys on this staff since he was in high school. So I think he'll bring a level of leadership, maybe not as vocal right now as he will be later on, but he can score the basketball and he can defend. So he's going to be a solid player for us.
What kind of pressure is it for a guy coming home like that? I mean, he's going to have a lot of people in his ear from the neighborhood, but what kind of pressure is it to coming home and playing in front of everybody every night?
Well, I think going away for that 2 years is going to help him. I don't think there will be very much pressure on him. I think he has a level of maturity that he can tell the people in the neighborhood, hey, back up. We're doing these things this way. This is how coach wants things done, and then be able to go out there and perform. But it's always good to be able to play, in my opinion, in front of your family, your friends, people that, you know, it just brings a level of comfort. And I see him, you know, playing really well this year because he just brings so much. I mean, he's a bigger body, stronger guard. He can, you know, if we get to some booty ball, he can do that. We all know how well he shoots the basketball. Now with, you know, having slimmed down and become more explosive, he can get to the basket and finish as well. So I expect big things from him. And, you know, with KJ being at the point that's going to allow him to be a little bit more of a scorer on the wing, which I think will free him up as well.
Yeah, and what do you think of the three position? Trey White got the start. Ty Rodgers plays the three as well. Is he still looking for something there, or do you expect Trey White to start when they play Eastern, or how do you see that kind of shaking out?
I think that's one of those things Brad is going to continue to look at. And try to delve into how he wants to play that three position. But, you know, one of the things, and I hate to call it a three position because Brad plays really kind of a positionless style of basketball when he has
4 or 5 out kind of thing.
yeah,
So
when he has his kind of players. Tommy will allow him to be able to play definitely four guards or however he wants to go. Now, what I will say is this: I think what Ty Rodgers brings is invaluable. You have a guy that you don't really have to run any offense for. That has improved his shooting. I mean, now, no, he's not a KJ, he's not a Kylan Boswell, but you're going to have to respect him, I believe, after watching him shoot from 17 and in. We all know how he can get to the basket. We all know how he rebounds the basketball. So I think he's one of the ultimate glue guys that you have to have out on the floor. So it's not a matter if he starts, but it's where he is and what he does at the moments of the game that are important. And then, my coach used to always say, it doesn't matter who's in the game at the beginning, it's who's in the game at the end. And I
What they
think
all
you'll
say.
see
Yeah.
exactly. And I think you'll see Ty Rodgers on the floor at the end of games.
What
Looking at the four, you look at the four position, talked about the one, the two, the three, talked about the five, Tommy, the four position, Ben, we know Ben's going to be a good shooter, right?
Yes.
Didn't show it against Ole Miss. I think he went 0 for 4 from three, 1 for 5 from the field. Do you feel like maybe there was a little bit of nerves or maybe he was sped up a little bit in that game?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when Ben has earned his way from the NAIA to a mid-major to a high major. That says who he is as a player. And as a shooter, shots fall. There'll be some days he don't make one, but then there'll be a day where he makes 10. That's what shooters do. I mean, but when you look at this kid's overall shot numbers, that he puts up in practice and has put up in games, he's shooting comparable to most high-level NBA shooters. So I'm not concerned about him missing a few shots down there. He is definitely going to make shots. He's going to make baskets. I like him at the four position. I believe what Coach has a myriad of people that he I mean, you can put Ty at the four. I mean, you can put Will Riley at the four. There's just so much that he has, in his toolbox to be able to do with guys and put them in various positions. I mean, we all saw Dre and how he played. I mean, Draven could be one of your starters and you run a three guard offense. I mean, who's to say? Doug, is so far up in the air right now, man. I'm just riding the wave like everyone else. I mean, because you could even take Trey White and put him at a smaller four. I mean, there's just so many things that he can do. So I do like Ben at the four. I like, sorry, even if you go to play two bigs, you can play Tommy at the four and then put Morez at the center. I mean, there's so many things that they can do, and I'm sure we'll see all of that in this upcoming non-conference before we get into any serious games.
Whereas Johnson 6 rebounds in 13 minutes, and it really wasn't against the backups. The starters were still in the game for Ole Miss when he was grabbing those boards. What kind of glass eater is this kid? What do you think are some of the growth areas for him that he's going to have to improve at a little bit?
Everything. I mean, he's a heck of a player, highly rated player. We saw what he did with the USA team when he was playing. If I'm him, I'm his coach. I want him to concentrate on rebounding and running the floor. Because if he does those two things, he can average almost a double-double. I mean, I think he's a walking double-double if he's out on the floor for any length of time. Now, what does he need to work on? Of course, he's going to have to continue to work on his post game, being able to have the ability to finish with both hands around the basket. And he's also going to have to work on extending his jump shot. We don't need him to do that right now. I hope he understands that this is a period of time where he can continue to develop and grow as a player. And I think, like I said, year one, rebound the basketball, run the floor. That's what I want him to do, and protect the rim. He should be able to average a couple block shots a game, and like I said, and do those other things. And then as he continues to grow, into next year, then he'll be able to step out and do some of those other things. I love Morez Johnson as a player. And I was joking with him, and I wish I could have walked on campus with his body as a freshman. I mean,
Yeah,
He's put together, man.
I see him kind of maybe it's not a good analogy, but he looks like a Michigan State type of rebounder. A guy
Oh yeah.
who'll bump and go. The way he can change directions, and of course with that body, he chews up space in the paint, but just a natural rebounder. He's quick off 2 feet, strong pulling the ball down with 2 hands. And I agree
Mhm.
with you. I mean, and you want him to run the court and rebound. He can do that. There's no doubt.
Oh
There's
yeah.
no doubt he can do that. And he's going to play a big role for him this year, I think.
Oh no, I agree, and that's why I want him to concentrate on the two ways to help this team. And I think that is the three biggest ways I mentioned: rebounding, running the floor, blocking out, and just pick up all those other little things and dunk the ball around the basket. He has a pretty decent shot from the free throw line. Get there and shoot you about 5, 6, 7 free throws a game because he can do that. I mean, just by his activity alone, and you mentioned his athleticism, he can do those things with his eyes closed.
Yeah, and you're mentioning a lot of names and a lot of faces, and it just seems like it's going to be really hard to keep everybody happy with minutes in this era where guys move around so much. How much does Brad worry about that or concern himself with that? And how does a coach deal with the JUCO style of 12 new faces or 10 new faces and trying to keep people happy while you're developing and trying to win games?
Well, I think that's where it comes in, as I mentioned earlier. You have to make sure that you put an emphasis on one thing, and that it's about winning. It's not about the individual; it's about the team. So if you're paying attention to the name on the front of the shirt, and you're going out there and you're playing and you're trying to be better every day in practice, I think a lot of those things take care of themselves. So it kind of calms down. And when you're in practice, the guys know who the other guy is. Oh, yeah, that's the guy. I bet if you ask anyone off last year's team, hey, was Terrence Shannon the guy? And they're all going to be like, yep. And that's including Coleman Hawkins. There's not going to be one person that will dispute because they're in practice with the guys every day. They see it first and foremost of who the guy is. The coach doesn't have to say that, and guys easily and quickly start to see where they fall in the rung. Now, this is where they have to stay motivated. And this is where I think Coach Underwood is really good at, is getting the guys to not focus on themselves, but to focus on the team. And, you've heard them, we're everyday guys. And we have all seen what Brad does. If you don't perform in practice that week and somebody else does, that person will more than likely be in the lineup. It may not be you. If there's a better matchup or something like that. And this is one of the things that he and his staff does well by explaining this to guys. And if you go through life, my mother always told me, John, if you go through life trying to make everybody happy, you ain't gonna make nobody happy.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to concentrate on, and they all have set a goal. I think he will concentrate on the goals, and those guys that pay more attention to that instead of paying attention to other things, they'll be better off, and the team will be better off.
Yeah, and you can tell that Brad Underwood is really happy with where the program is at relative to where it was when he started. I think 7 years ago. Um, First of all, he's a different coach from a mental standpoint, I think, or emotional standpoint. Seems relaxed. No one's ever going to accuse him of being mild mannered. That's just not who he is. But he's not the same coach that he was 2 or 3 years ago, especially when he was dealing with a couple of freshman point guards a couple of years ago. It's a stressful season. But the other way you can tell how comfortable he is he's got we will play anywhere, anybody, anywhere, anytime. And they've got probably the most challenging non-conference schedule that he's had since he got to Illinois. Um, what do you think of that schedule? Is it great for them to be playing these teams like Alabama and Arkansas and Duke on national television? Those marquee games at marquee arenas.
Well, I mean, I understand. What are you playing for? And I think Brad, as well as the staff, have responded clearly to what they're playing for. Your job is to win a national championship. That's what everybody is setting out for. You don't get there by playing cream puffs. You get there by, we used to have an expression, I'm sure you've heard this, that iron sharpens iron. It starts in practice, and then it starts in who you play. And I think this is why our schedule is as tough as it is. I mean, it's kind of the Michigan State way, right? This is what Tom Izzo has done for decades. You know, he put together this hellacious schedule. You go out there, and then when you come into the Big Ten season, oh, you're all ready because you've played some monsters throughout your non-conference, and you're ready to go, barring injury, to make a deep run. And I think that's what he is concentrated on. I think that's why they put together this schedule. And I think that's why you have seen some of the changes on this team that you have with, I think it's a step, you know, you can't replace a Terrence Shannon Jr. He's just special. But I think at every other position on the floor, we have gotten better. And that's what you want to do. And I think that's what they've done. And I think this is why you can look at the schedule. You can look at these exhibition games. You know, if you look at the Butler, and you look at the Ole Miss, because they're trying to get these guys experience, but at the same time, understanding that iron sharpens iron. You play against the best in order to become the best.
You also have to have an eye on the net ranking, right?
Oh,
That's
no doubt.
one of the reasons. So
All those little things come into play.
the net and the Ken Palm, you have to be aware of those things when you schedule teams, and not schedule a bunch of like you said, cream puffs. Yes.
Exactly. But you know, in doing so, you have to make sure that you're in a position where you're constantly getting better. Is strength of schedule important when it comes to seeding and stuff like that? Yes. I mean, and anybody that says that it's not, then they'd be fibbing on themselves. But at the same time, you don't want to only look at that as far as, you know, where they're going to seed you or any of that stuff. It's about making your team better. And if this is what you go through you go through hell to get to heaven, then that's what you do. And I think that's what this team is looking at. And I think this is what they're preparing for.
It seems like one of the big deals this winter will be how well and how mature these guys are when they're preparing for these games. Back in your day, you basically played a round robin against everybody. You know, it was a 10 or 11 team league. You knew pretty much everybody. You got 18 teams now, and you're not playing everybody twice. Here comes some other new team in. How important is it for these guys to learn how to learn the scouting report, know what they're doing, and listening to coach to be prepared for, when they're playing one team on the East Coast, one team on the West Coast?
Well, that's very important. And I mean, it was important even when I was playing. I mean, back in my day, if you don't know the personnel that you're going up against or the possible schemes that the other coaches are going to run against you, then you're asking for failure, and I don't think, having been around these players and sat and watched their interactions with one another and how they interact with the coaches, I don't believe that's going to be an issue. Even our freshmen seem to be very mature. And again, this goes back to taking this big loss down at Ole Miss. That's what the same thing you're going to run into every night. So how do you alleviate a lot of the errors, mistakes, and maybe teams taking advantage of you? Is by paying attention to the scouting report. It's by paying attention to what you see in video. It's by paying attention and listening to what your coaches have and perfecting your game plan. This is a very mature team. It's a young team, but watching them deal with each other, it comes across to me as a team that's not filled with a bunch of freshmen, but filled with a bunch of guys that are juniors.
So they've been around the game. They've been around the game a long time, and they've been around high-level games a long time.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some closing thoughts before we wrap it up. But if you go by ticket sales and you go by social media activity and just the buzz around the program, it's remarkable. Illinois fans have bought into a team that they only know two players. So what is it about the Illinois brand right now you think that gets the fans, especially the students? They sold out in just a few minutes when they put the season tickets on sale.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, what is it about the program and where it's at where you think the fans they're going to be there? They're bought in and they're ready to go.
Well, I mean, we can go back to even look at the tough times under Brad, under John. We were still putting 13,000, 14,000 people inside the State Farm Center, but there's a sense of the fans, the supporters, everything, as you mentioned, around this program now since year 3 from Brad on has been amped up, extra charged. They really, really appreciate him as a coach, how he coaches, his ability to connect with the fans and with the supporters, as well as the players, and then how he runs the program, and again, who he brings onto this team and into this program. All of that, I think, has created this fervor around this team that's real. I mean, this team is probably one of the most skilled offensive depth that we've had in such a long time. We didn't mention Trey White. I watched Trey when he was at Louisville. I thought he was a good player, and then I watched him here, and I was like, holy crap, didn't realize the kid shot the ball like that. Didn't realize that he did all these things. And these are things, I think, where these coaches have done their homework and they see and they put these puzzles together. And the average fan is a heck of a lot more savvy than they were before, simply because there's so much more information out on these guys. And I think that's why they're so excited, because they've been able to go on and watch KJ when he was playing in Europe. They've been able to follow Ben and what he did, and Jake and what he did, and even Trey and what they did at their other institutions. And then, of course, these guys coming in from high school. So I think all of this is like a big snowball, and you've taken it, you've compacted it, and now everybody's just ready to throw it, man, because there's a chance that this is going to be a heck of a team, especially if they continue to grow and connectivity.
Great point about information. I remember back in the day, you had to read Lauren Tate's column to know what team was going to be taking the floor, right? That had to break out the News Gazette. You didn't know, so.
Very true. And we still read Lauren's column.
Mm-hmm. So, Deon, they were picked around 4th in the Big Ten. How do you think that's about accurate, or what do you think?
This team can be anywhere from 1st to 4th. From a talent standpoint, we're definitely, in my opinion, top 2 or 3, 1 or 2 or 3. There's so many new faces from so many different places, depending on how they come together. We can win the championship outright, or we can finish 4th. But from a talent standpoint, I hate predictions and I hate preseason stuff, because they go off of what you did last year, and I don't think a lot of people understand how good this team can be. We're just going to have to see and watch them grow together, because we're going to be competing there at the end for sure.
All right, Deon. Hey, well, thanks so much for coming on. We always love to have you. Great insight, and really look forward to Monday and seeing you courtside again for another college basketball season.
You and me both, Doug. I will see you Monday, my friend. I have a great time as always with you guys. Thank you. And go Illini.
All righty. Thanks, Deon.
All righty.